Hi, it's Vicki. We're in the kitchen today and we're going to be making cream puffs. Now, I titled this the easiest dessert ever that has a wow factor because yes, it does have a wow factor. People think that you spent hours in the kitchen and you really didn't, and it's super simple. So the recipe's in the description below, but I'm going to be just using half of the recipe today because, well, you know, we're eating all this stuff. So I'm going to start by turning my oven on. The recipe says 400. I often do 425 on mine. That's just because my oven is a little slow and it just doesn't get as hot as what you want with cream puffs. You want that oven to be really hot to cause steam inside. So that's where my oven is set, and now let's get started with this. We have the water we're putting in our pan, and you're going to bring that to a boil, and you'll be also adding your margarine or your butter. In this case I'm using butter, and we'll let that get to a boil. So while that's doing its heating up thing, we will come over here and get the rest of the ingredients together. It's very simple ingredients, not a lot to it. So you've already done the water and the butter, and now you have your egg, and again, half a recipe, otherwise you'd be using 2 eggs with the regular recipe. And it takes half a cup of flour. Now I'm going to be using gluten-free flour. Now I have used that in this recipe before. It sometimes does not turn out quite so nice and crispy brown like regular flour does, but we'll give it a try today. I'm also going to be sifting it prior to just dumping it into the pan. Now, when I say sifting, I'll show you my setup here. It is pretty rudimentary because I don't have a sifter. I don't need a sifter. It takes up space, but I have my 1/4 cup of flour. I'm putting it in this little tiny strainer, and this strainer works great when you just tap it against your hand like this, and voila, you have sifted flour. And this little gizmo takes up a whole lot less space in my cabinet than a sifter would that I don't even use that much. So that's what we're doing with that. Now we'll measure it back out again because now it's all nice and light and fluffy, and that will make for fluffy cream puffs, which is exactly what you want. And there you go. That's ready to go. So we'll put these aside and we'll go back over to our oven and see how we're doing over here with the ingredients in the pot. They are bubbling nicely. And we'll give this a little bit of a stir. I want to get that butter completely melted. And that's looking pretty good. I'm going to get the other ingredients. All right, so we're going to now dump our flour in, and we're just going to stir that vigorously over a lower heat. I had it on high. I'm going to turn it down to 3. And we're going to stir and stir and stir, and it doesn't take long. It forms into a ball away from the sides of the pan. So this is what you're looking for. Now, I then remove it from the heat. I add a dash of salt. Some recipes do, some don't, but I feel like it helps to brown the tops a little bit. Otherwise they're not as brown, and that's okay too. So if you don't want the salt, feel free to leave that out. Now I'm going to put in my egg, and I think I'm going to beat that egg first. It's a lot easier to incorporate it into that dough that way than to not have that part ready. Another thing I want to do first is I want to get my pan ready. So I'm going to use a small sheet pan, and I'm going to line that with parchment paper. So I'll do that first, and then we'll put the dough on it. Now this part will give you muscles because you have to stir for a little while to get it incorporated, but you pour your egg in there and you're going to start mixing it. Now I want to show you before I mix too much here again to see the consistency of this. That is a very stiff dough. The egg will incorporate in. It just takes quite a bit of stirring. So sometimes if someone else is in the kitchen and I just need a break from the stirring, I'll just ask them to stir a little bit. But this is about the most time-consuming part of this dessert. So in my book, that's not bad. I wouldn't use a whisk for this. I just think that's not the right tool for it. It kind of needs more like a paddle. So you want a large wooden spoon. A metal spoon will do okay too, but it really should be a larger spoon so that it incorporates more of the dough all at once. And this is starting to look very nice. It's very well integrated, the egg into the batter, and it's getting a nice consistency. I want to do it a little bit longer here just because it's not smooth yet, and you're better off with a nice smooth, almost elastic dough. This is a much stickier dough than what you had when you just had the flour that you were incorporating into it. That kind of pulled away from the sides. This pulls away as well, but it is a stickier dough. All right, that's looking really nice to me right now. So we are going to use that. And what I do is just get enough on a spoon that it looks like that's about the size I want. I like to do a smaller cream puff, and people like to have seconds that way. They don't feel as guilty having a second when it's a very small cream puff than if you give them a very large one. So again, something just about that size is fine. If you want to make large ones, you can. You're just going to need to increase your time in the oven. Now you want to make them somewhat even too so that they cook evenly, and I think this is about right. So there's just a small tray of some cream puffs. So let's put them in the oven, and we'll be putting ours in. Since this is just such a small tray of them, we'll put these in for 20 minutes. While the cream puffs are in the oven, I'm going to work on making the cream filling. And when I say that, I mean I'm going to be using boxed pudding. You can certainly make your own pudding, but again, I'm looking for something fast and quick, but with a wow factor. It's very simple. You have your 2 cups of milk, which we'll pour into the bowl. And you whisk it up like you do pudding. Not very hard. And the thing is about this dessert is it's also great for don't want a lot of sugar in their diet, because if you recall, the cream puffs themselves have no sugar. So since the cream puffs have no sugar and your only sugar would be in your pudding, if you're trying to avoid the sugar altogether, you can use a sugar-free pudding. Again, there's times when I make my own pudding because I want something more natural and not all the things that I can't pronounce on this box. But today's not that day. So we will just whip this up real quick, put it in the fridge, and it'll be ready to go when the cream puffs are cool. Okay, let's see how this is doing in here. We have just 28 seconds left on the timer. I had put them in for 20 minutes. And ooh, they look pretty nice in there. I am going to let them go a little bit longer though. I think I'm going to put them back in at, let's see, let's do 6 minutes, and then we'll circle back. All right, here we go. I ended up putting them in for 11 minutes more total. So we're about at 30 minutes. Let's turn off that annoyance. And they look really good to me. I mean, that's about what you want. You want them to be, just ignore the dirt. You want them to be browned and crispy. All over here to cool. You want to get them off the tray right away, and that will help keep moisture from building up in the cream puff. Now let's open them up a little bit because you don't want that steam to continue in there. So if they're super hot and you can't handle them, you can just kind of poke a hole in there like that. Mine aren't too bad, so I'm going to just kind of remove the top a little bit. And you know, if the side breaks off like that one did, again, it's not that big of a deal, because when they get all done and they're on the plate, you'd be so surprised how nice this looks for how little effort went into doing these. So now we're going to let them cool, and you know, you can probably see the steam coming out of those. Those are super hot inside, and we will let all of that steam go out, and then I'll be back. Now let's look at what we have here. I usually scoop out a little bit of this, and since it's just us eating them, I'll do it with my fingers. It's easier, but you can scoop it out with a spoon, and honestly, if you don't, it's okay. It's just that this is very moist and kind of wet from the moisture that builds up inside the cream puffs in the oven, and so I just like to take that off. Oh, then I'm going to go over here and get my pudding out of the fridge, and I will get this in here. Now, what you really want on there is the crowning glory, which you can sprinkle a little bit of powdered sugar on these, and that makes a nice finish, but I like to go with a little bit of chocolate because why not? So I'm using Ghirardelli chocolate today. This is the dark chocolate, I believe. Yes, the 60%. And I like this because I feel like it melts better than what your standard chocolate chips do. So I'm going to put these into the microwave just for a bit, and let's turn that around so you can see. And I'll put them in for, I usually do 30 seconds. And then after 30, you can check it and see what you think. I stir it around a little bit. If it still seems like they're not melted enough, then I'll put them in for another 15. All right, it did not melt as all the way. I'm keep putting it back in for 15 seconds to see when it gets to the right consistency for you. And here we go. I usually just kind of do this with the fork. Again, it really makes a nice presentation, and if you have some strawberries or some raspberries, red raspberries, that looks very nice as well. You can just kind of dice them up and put them on the plate and go with your chocolate right over them as well. Really looks impressive. And you might want to take your chocolate a little bit out on the plate just to finish it off. All right, let's give this a try and see what we think. Now, I will say these are very hard to eat with a fork because as soon as you do this, it all squishes out. So at my house, we just kind of do it this way and we eat it as so, and it's delicious. Delicious, easy, and impressive. It's a winning combination. So enjoy.